Hey guys, today I'm back with 10 more knitting hacks that will change your life. And I'm only slightly exaggerating. The last knitting tip video had a lot of great comments, so I decided to crowdsource my favorite comments into this video. So without further ado, let's get into it. Roll the intro. If you knit with a ball of yarn, like a literal ball of yarn, then you know that that sucker can roll all over the place, picking up dust, dog fur, cat fur, all manner of crap that hangs out on your floor. Enter the yarn bowl. This handy tool holds your ball of yarn as you're knitting, so it'll spin around and yet stay in the same place. Now you can buy a yarn bowl online, and some of them are true works of art. But this being a hack video, I've got some ways for you to turn everyday household objects into a yarn bowl. So a couple of you mentioned a coffee cup, which is so brilliant. So basically you would use just a small quantity of yarn, pop it into the cup, feed the yarn through the sippy hole right here, close up the coffee cup. There you go, you've got an instant yarn bowl. Another hack involves using a flower pot and a smaller plate or bowl. So what we're gonna do is take out the flour, get your yarn, put it in the small bowl, feed it through the hole that's in your flower pot, drop the flower pot on top of the bowl, and there you go, instant yarn bowl. You guys are so creative when it comes to stitch markers. Check out this comment where the suggestion is to use the markers on your electric toothbrush as a stitch marker. It's so brilliant because these little markers come in a bunch of different colors. If you happen to have an electric toothbrush, then you've got some instant stitch markers there. Here's another interesting one from commenter Evil Monkey. They write, for stitch markers, I just snip off the end of a straw. Your average straw will fit up to a size 9 needle. Those big smoothie straws can sometimes go up to an 11, can confirm. So I know that straws are kind of being phased out of some cities because of their effect on the environment and that viral sea turtle. So if you don't want anything to do with plastic straws, I get it, ignore the straw hack. Now this next stitch marker hack involves using a bulb pin as a stitch marker. And these guys are the shiz. They're super thin, meaning that they won't leave a big gap if you're knitting with a lightweight yarn. And because you can open them up, they act like a split ring stitch marker, meaning that you can take them off or put them on your knitting anytime you like. Best of all, bulb pins are super cheap. You can also get them for free from clothing tags. I always get super happy when I find one on a tag. It's like a fun free gift. So stitch markers are all around you, from your local fast food joint to electric toothbrushes to clothing tags. They're everywhere! If you want good quality yarn, then you're gonna have to pay for it. Merino, alpaca, cashmere, silk, these are high-end fibers, and there's a reason they cost a lot, because they're amazing. And if you don't wanna spend a lot of money on yarn, then consider going to the thrift store. No, you're not going there to buy yarn, you're going there to hunt for sweaters. So this is the sweater that I ended up choosing from the thrift store. This cost a total of $6 US, so it's a really good deal, and it is a one-ply, super bulky weight yarn. It's 100% wool and it feels so soft. So from this sweater, I think I could get like 3 or maybe even 4 hats out of it. So for $6, that's a steal. So next what we're gonna do is unravel the yarn so that it's no longer a sweater, but yarn that we can use to make whatever we like. All right, so I'm going to turn the sweater inside out. Most commercial knit sweaters are seamed together. That is the case with this sweater here. I can see big seams up the side and seamed at both of the shoulders. The seam is sewed together with this super bulky yarn. So I can actually just use a pair of scissors to start unpicking the seam. If you're using a thinner yarn, you may need to use a stitch picker like this. But for me, because I've chosen bulky yarn, I'm just gonna use my scissors to slowly pick away at the seam. So go ahead and pull apart all the seams of the sweater. So I finished unseaming everything. My 2 pieces are separate now. We are going to unravel each piece into a ball. So as you unravel, you can just roll it into a ball. If you want to wash your yarn before you start knitting with it, which I would recommend because it is a used sweater after all, you can introduce a large book or a storage bin lid and start rolling the yarn onto the long end of it. I will take one end of it and then roll it onto the book like this. All right, so I've wrapped up my book with a lot of the yarn, and now I'm just going to snip it off. And what I'm gonna do is just tie these two ends together. And I like to add in an extra, colorful yarn just so I can find the beginning and the end of the yarn later on when I'm untying everything. So now my little yarn hank is secure on this book, and I'm going to add in a couple more ties in this hank. So I'll just cut off a length of yarn and I'll throw in a tie here, and then just tying it up. And I'm gonna make it very loose here so that the yarn can spread out when it's washing and also when it's drying. I'll do it on the other side as well. Just go underneath that yarn hank and then tie a little tie in there. So now that I've got 1, 2, 3 yarn ties around my yarn hank, I can take it off the book. So now I can lift it up by a yarn tie and it stays fairly secure, and it's this loopy loop that we can now wash. I've got a tub of room temperature water, and I'm just gonna use a little bit of baby shampoo here. If you've watched the last hack video, you know that I love using baby shampoo, and I'm just going to throw it right into this water, submerge it, and then let it sit for like 10-15 minutes. 15 minutes have passed, and now I'm going to gently lift up the yarn and then push out the water. I don't want to wring it out like this, that's not good. When you can't squeeze out anymore, then you're going to get out a towel and then lay out your little yarn hank so that it can dry. And then roll it up, squeeze out as much water as I can. Bam, 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 bam. All right, so now I'm just going to let this dry.
The next day.
So my yarn is dried now, and you can see that it isn't so curly anymore. It's nice and straight and even, which will make knitting with it a lot easier. All right, so first we'll untie this and all the other ties, and then we can start unraveling the yarn. All right, so I'm gonna untie the yarn here, and now the yarns leading into the hank have been untied. So I'll get out my scissors and just snip off these yarn ties. So in order to keep the hank open, I'm going to bring in like a canister of coffee. So you can use a can of soup or whatever you have around. I'll just place this in the center of the hank to force it to remain open. So now let's unravel the yarn. I'll grab one end of the yarn and just start rolling it into a ball. That's it. Sometimes you might have to untangle it a little bit, but for the most part, it should be smooth sailing. And ta-da! I've rolled my hank into a ball of yarn, and now I can start knitting with it. This used to be a sweater, and now I can knit it into anything that I want. Amazing. If you knit cables, then you're probably familiar with the cable needle. These needles hold your stitches as you're cabling. But instead of buying a cable needle, you can use an assortment of household objects to get the job done. So here I've just got a little cable going with some sock weight yarn. And when I'm using such a thin yarn, I can actually use a toothpick as a cable needle. I'm just going to move my stitches that need to be held onto this toothpick. I've got them on my toothpick, so now I can just work my next stitches. And now I'm ready to put these stitches that are on my toothpick back onto the other needle. There we go, and now I can set my toothpick aside and just continue cabling. So there's a cable that I've just made with this toothpick. Not just good for picking food out of your teeth, also amazing as a cable needle with sock weight yarn. Now, if I'm cabling with a chunky weight yarn, then what I can use is a pencil. I can use my pencil to hold my stitches, take the stitches from my pencil back onto my needle and knit into those stitches. And now I've just made a lovely cable with the help of an HB pencil. If you block your knitting projects, you're probably laying them down on a towel. This can work, but you'll notice that your towel ends up soaking a lot of water, creating a kind of swampy environment, making it even harder for your knitting project to dry. But if you've got a yoga mat or one of those floatable swim mats that they sell at Toys R Us, then you can use that instead. So after blocking, soak the extra water with a towel, unfurl your yoga mat, and lay your knitting on it. Then pin the knitting to your desired measurement and let it dry. You'll notice that the knitting dries a lot faster on a mat than it does on a towel. That's it. No matter how long your ball of yarn is, at some point it's going to run out. To keep knitting, you'll need to join a new ball of yarn. Now you could just tie a knot, but I would not recommend that. Now you can do an assortment of things like knit into your next stitch with your new yarn and then weave in ends, or you can do this weird thing with your spit. Now this hack only works with animal fibers, so like wool, alpaca, mohair, camel. It's not going to work with synthetic or cellulose fibers like cotton or linen or acrylic or nylon. Are you intrigued and kind of grossed out? Because you should be. Next we're going to start spitting on our yarn. Ew. I'm going to join these two strands of yarn together. So what we're going to do first is we need to unravel this ply of yarn. So all I'm going to do is just kind of untwist it. Here we go. All right, so I've unplied one end of my yarn and it looks so cool and crazy. And I'm going to work on my second strand now. Again, I'm just going to untwist it. All right, so here we go. My second strand has been unplied. So now this is where the spit comes in. I'm going to put these unraveled yarn plies in my mouth. Oh gosh, okay. Oh, okay. So you might wonder, why can't we do this with water? Something about saliva is good at joining animal fibers together. So these are nicely soaked with my saliva. Ew. And I'm just gonna lay them on top of each other like this. And now I'm going to put them both in my palm, and then I'm going to just roll them together, okay? And magic is happening between your hands right now. All right, so it's been about a minute. So let's take a look at our yarn join, and this is where our yarn plies were just overlaid, and you can see that there is a join here, okay? You might think, hey, isn't this gonna like pull apart? Let's take a look here. No pulling apart. It is very firm. I'm pretty happy with it. My yarn is now joined together. It's one long strand of yarn, and now I can just continue knitting with my yarn. Amazing. In the last knitting tip video, I talked about using washi tape and post-it notes to keep my chart organized. But you guys, oh, you guys had so many good extra suggestions, I had to include them in this video. One that I really like is using a page protector for your charts. So the idea is that you slip your chart into a page protector and then use a post-it note or washi tape to underline or overline your row. Now, overlining your row is great because you can see the rows that you've already worked, and the shape of the cable is visible as you knit your chart. So if you spill something on your chart, then no worries. That's what your page protector is for. Most knitters cast off and bind off pretty tightly, but the cast off and bind off edges are supposed to be relaxed and kind of elastic. So how do we make those edges artificially looser? Well, dear viewer, you can use a larger needle. So if you're knitting with, say, a 4.5mm needle, then cast off and bind off with a 5mm or even a 5.5mm needle if you're a very tight knitter. Then once you finish casting on, switch to your regular needle and knit as normal. When you're ready to bind off, bring out those larger needles again and use them to bind off. That's it. Now your cast on and bind off edge will be nice and elastic. Have you ever seen those really cool cakes of yarn? They're kind of like crisscrossed and there's like a yarn coming out of the center. They look so cool. Yeah, those magical yarn cakes are called center pull balls of yarn. Most of the time they're made by a yarn winder, which looks like kind of a naked umbrella. But this being a hack video, you know I'm not going to tell you to buy a naked yarn winding umbrella. Instead, I'll show you how to wind your yarn into a center pull ball with nothing more than a toilet paper roll. Such magic. So I've got a toilet paper roll, a pair of scissors, and a pencil, and that's all we need to make a center pull ball of yarn. Well, you'll also need a regular schmegula ball of yarn that you want to turn into a fancy center pull ball. So first I'm going to take my toilet paper roll and make a small cut at the top. Then I'll make another cut directly across from the first cut. So now I'm just going to take my yarn and slip it into the cut, and I'm just leaving a bit of a tail. All right, so now what I'm gonna do is just take my yarn and just wrap in the middle of my toilet paper roll a couple times just to kind of secure it in place. And now we're going to mark our roll. I'm going to divide the roll into thirds. Now the best way to do this is to imagine a peace sign, okay? And I'm going to mark where the peace sign intersects, like basically around here and then like here. So now I'm going to start rolling my ball of yarn. So what I'm gonna do is roll on an angle. So I'm going kind of from the bottom to the top like this. I'm gonna do it like 4 times. See, I'm kind of wrapping from the bottom to the top. So I've done that 4 times. Now I'm going to move my roll over to the next marker that I've made here. Okay, and then I'm gonna roll again. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'm going to roll my roll over to this marker. and then I'm going to go from the bottom to the top right here. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 is just the number I've decided on. You can do 5, you can do 3, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to turn it again to this marker, okay, a third of the way around the roll. And I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, turn it again. I'm going to place my thumb onto that marker. 1, 2, 3, 4, turn it again. Thumb is on the marker. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm just turning the roll, using these markers as a way for me to remember this is a third of the way around the roll, placing my thumb on the marker, and then just wrapping the yarn from the bottom kind of to the top. Okay, now if you do like 5 wraps instead of 4, it's not a big deal at all, okay? So continue doing this until your entire ball of yarn has been wrapped up onto your roll. So as your roll begins to fill up, you can kind of push it into the center just to keep it nice and secure. All right, so now my yarn cake is really big and you can see some great kind of crisscrossing action there. So I'm going to just snip off the yarn. Here we go. Slide this tail end into the cake of yarn, just kind of slipping it in there. Cool. All right, so remember this yarn at the beginning? This is where we slipped it into our little toilet roll. So I'm going to pull that yarn loose. There we go. So this is going to be where we're going to pull the yarn from our ball. So now we're going to take our yarn cake off of the toilet paper roll. Ugh. All right, our yarn cake is off of the roll and it looks amazing. So I'm going to just set this yarn cake down and I'm just going to pull, and you can see that, whoa, it's coming through the center. We are so baller. We got ourselves a center pull ball of yarn, and it can also just sit really nicely, and I don't need to worry about it kind of rolling around everywhere. It's just gonna sit here and I can just pull it for days, and it's just gonna keep on going until we're done. So that is how you roll a center pull ball of yarn. I got so much money over here. Make it rain. Woo! So why am I flashing this filthy lucre in your face? Because we're going to use it to measure our knitting. What else are we gonna do with money? So commenter LM says a dollar bill is 6 inches by 2.5 inches. So fold it in half, 3 inches. Fold that in 3, 1 inch. So a US bill is actually 2.6 inches by 6.1 inches, just to be exact. But I think we can still use this hack to measure our knitting when we're in a pinch. Sometimes you're knitting on double pointed needles and an accident happens like this. Ah! So in order to keep your stitches safe, you can put a cork in it. So what you can do is line up all of your double pointed needles, and I'm just going to stab it into the cork. Ugh! Literally just push it in, and there we go. Now our stitches are nice and safe and they cannot fall off the needle. And I can do the same on the other side as well. I've got a fancy champagne cork here, celebrations, and just push it into the double pointed needle, and now there's no way that the knitting is going to fall off. And that's a wrap on 10 more knitting hacks that'll change your life. Are you going to use a coffee cup as a yarn bowl, or head to the thrift store to score some luxe yarn at rock bottom prices? Maybe you'll spit in your yarn, making your project truly one of a kind. I'm Davina from sheepandstitch.com. Thanks for watching, happy hacking, and I'll see you next time. Bye!